automation. Oh, it does have a timer. Oh, it has a timer up there.
Yeah.
You said it.
Well, as soon as we get the thumbs up, we can do it.
Yeah. Then we can have that just as that gets closer and up, you know. All right. Ready?
Yep.
All right. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah, that works. All right. Today, first of all, I'm Adam Compton, Austin Lane. We work for Rapid7 on our day jobs, but last you'll hear from that. But still, today we're going to be talking about automated pen testing toolkit and pen testing automation along the way, along with that. Before we get started a little much, who am I? Everybody has the obligatory who am I slides. So who am I? I'm a father, I'm a husband, hillbilly by birth, and raising pen tester for most of my professional life. Trained as a programmer, been doing that off and on over my life as well. I love it all, wouldn't give any of it up. Love my children and my wife as well, of course. Have to say, no, I love them all. I love them all. They're up here somewhere, so.
Hey everyone, my name is Austin Lane. This is my first talk, so, bear with me. Alright. I spent about 7 years as a developer making horrible, insecure stuff, and then I switched over to security and spent the last 4 years breaking all of that stuff, so it's been pretty exciting. Not quite as long as Adam, but, it's been a lot of fun, so I'm really excited to be here.
Well, your beard isn't as long either.
Yeah, I'm working on the beard. So, like we said, here today we're talking about automation of pen testing and our tool, the automated pen testing toolkit. Basically, in our experience as pen testers, we've found that most tests sort of go through a routine. There's, the recon and discovery, finding out what's on the network that you're looking at, testing simple services, there's things you do for FTP, there's things you do for SMB, there's things you do for NetBIOS, stuff like that. Default creds, you're running lists, you're going through appliances that have admin or something like that. You move to common exploits, MSO 8067, things like that, that'll get you access to a machine. Once you get access, you start dumping creds and info, you're using Mimikat, something like that, to pull info off of the machine and then turn around and use that as a pivot to get further access into the network. What we found is this routine can be slow on large networks. The bigger the network, the more instances of each service you're going to have, the more of each of these that you're going to have to go through and say, okay, anonymous, admin, stuff like that on every single one of them. But what we found is most of this can be automated. Linux in general and a lot of other tools have some great stuff, Bash, Python, Perl, Ruby, anything you want to do to run some of these automatically, but in each instance, you're running your own things, you're having to come up with a quick bash script to, do the same task over and over again and then dump all of that into a file that you can review. So we wrote a tool to help with the automation. This is APT2. So let's go through sort of a typical pen test routine. Generally you start off with Nmap. You're scanning all the ports. Your client's giving you 10.0.0/8. So you're going to be there all day looking at everything that's running on this giant network. When you get the results back, you go through and you say, okay, I see port 21, so I'm going to run FTP against this, and I'm going to look for things like anonymous FTP or, what's being hosted on these FTP servers. I see port 80 or 443. Go through and I'm going to take screenshots of all the websites that are on here to see, are these custom sites, are these appliances that are hosting these services. I'm going to run something like Nikto maybe that looks for like, oh, this is a vulnerable CMS, so you can use this against this one. SSL scan if it's 443, you're going to see like what versions of SSL are they running because, it's good for the reports and you might actually be able to do something with like Heartbleed or something like that. 445, SMB, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do on that, null enumeration, open shares, MSO 8067 if the client is really lazy, and the list goes on. Then you run responder, you do, capture some hashes, you do some relay attacks, and, basically at that point you've got access, because it always gets you access. And at the end of the day, you take over, you've attained your goal, you've gotten access to what it is that your client, is deemed important enough that, you're successful. You're on the domain controller. You're going through their database, getting credit card information. You've got their domain admin credentials, etc. Adam.
Thank you, Austin. So, like Austin was saying, that's a standard Pentest methodology. Not methodology, but a standard routine you go through. Start at the beginning, work your way through. Very manual process for the most part. It works. It works. Everybody does it to some degree, some fashion. Everybody goes along the same thing. Is it broken? Well, if it's not broken, should we be fixing it? Well, the thing is it is slightly flawed, if you want to say it that way, in that it relies on the human for much of it. And it's humans doing monotonous, repetitive actions over and over. Humans tend to get a little sloppy over time, especially if you're doing the same task a lot. So, getting into that, the manual process of parsing through all that data can be a little slow. You might get a little slap happy if you're doing this for like 12 hours a day, or if it's like 2 in the morning, for heaven's sake, if the customer is making you do a nighttime test or something like that. You might glance over or pass over something that you should be looking at and not flag on it. Consistency, are you checking every single service instance on the network for the same test, all that, or are you just sampling, things of that nature? Repeatability, same concept. It's also like, if I do an engagement, if we're targeting a customer that's has us do an engagement, I do a test for them every 6 months. I do the first one, Austin does the one 6 months from now, so forth. Is my base methodology the same as his? Yes, but is he going to go through testing it the same way or not? Probably not. Maybe for majority of it. Okay, so there's some discrepancy between our methodologies there. Some of the repeatability from the customer's point of view, things of that nature. There again, it all relies on the human, your experience, things of that nature. So it is slightly flawed, not necessarily broken. Well, we can fix a lot of the underlying aspects of this. Some of it we can tweak, things of that nature. And in particular, automation can help with a lot of this. Thus, we're talking about automation and pen testing. But still. So you might ask, why don't you just use insert favorite monolithic vulnerability scanning engine? Well, you can. You can, but there's certain issues with that, certain good things. So for example, some of the good things are there's a good number of them to choose from. Open source, commercial. Some of them are fairly cheap. Some of them are free. They're fairly useful and very useful in some scenarios, but maybe not in all. For example, you find the world's best web application scanner. That's great, but that doesn't really help you on other types of testing. Or you find something that's really good on one type of testing and it has lapses and other kind of stuff. So you're not going to find anything that covers everything perfectly. And I'm not going to say that APT does either, but it gives a good base to plug things in as we're talking. We'll talk about it later. Well, why not just use one of these large scanners to begin with? Well, while some of them are cheap, some of them can be fairly expensive. Yeah, leave it at that. Some of them can be fairly expensive. Some of them can be fairly resource intensive. For example, I power up one of these nice one scanners on my laptop here. This happens to be a fairly beefy one. It can handle it in a VM and go processing. I might not be able to fire up too many other VMs on here. It's eating up most of my RAM, processor, things of that nature. So, okay, it kind of ties my hands a little bit on that. But more importantly, you get down to, let's say you want to add a new check or a new test or a new tool or something to that big monolithic thing. How easy is it? In almost every case, it's going to be fairly difficult. Yeah, they might have a bug reporting board or something like that, but that might take weeks, months, so forth down the road for get fixed or get added in or things of that nature. as we're talking with APT later on, we'll show how easy it is, or we'll discuss how easy it is just to add your own tool in there, your own commands, your own updates, things of that nature. So, there again, I'm not saying that any of these big vulnerability scanning engines are bad. By no means am I saying that. I'm just saying that they're good for what they're targeting. We're looking for something a little more universal in there. A lot of this, okay, so you want to get something a little more broad spectrum, look at some other things. For those out there who've used Kali, which should be probably every single one of you out there for the most part, I would be willing to guess, you're already aware that most of the tools that you're going to be using on an engagement, things of that nature, you'll probably find in Kali. It might not be the absolute latest version, or you might have to add one or two tools in there. For the most part, there's quite a few in there. And as a basis, we tend to use Kali as well, so we build tools on top of it, things of that nature. Isn't required, but still we do so. So you want to automate some of your stuff. As Austin mentioned before, there's lots of different ways. You have Bash, you have any of your scripting languages, things like that. But also, keep in mind, a lot of these other tools have their own API interfaces, things of that nature. A lot of vulnerability scanners have RESTful APIs that you interface with. Metasploit has the MSGRPC interface you can use. Any number of other things. And if your tool doesn't, if insert tool Y doesn't have a kind of interface, if it can give you textual output of some kind that you can parse, you can script around that. It takes a little bit of regex, some parsing, a little manipulation, but you can do it. It's just a matter of how much you're willing to make the data fit the model that you want. So we went through a lot of that process, got it going, took care of a lot of the base work, get it up. We have several modules in there at the moment, and we're pretty happy with what we have so far, and it's hoped to grow a lot more, but we ended up writing APT2. A little aside, yes, I know APT2 is a weird acronym, stuff like that. It's my habit of naming tools after common acronyms that I like to make fun of, so sorry about that. But yeah, I have other ones out there, you can find them. But so what is APT2? It is a Python program that is built around three basic bubbles of parts. First, one of them is the knowledge base, where every piece of data that is gathered, processed, stored, things like that, is stored in. It's in just a knowledge base at the moment, generic knowledge base, no real relevance there, that's thread safe and so forth. Then you have the event queue, which says when certain actions should be run, when other ones shouldn't be, what are preconditions, postconditions. It's the real brain of the operation there. Then you have the modules. Modules are the same as they are in any other large program. It's like your Metasploit module is your plugins for Nmap, your whatever. It's the modules for APT. What they can be, they're very atomic. They perform small actions. They have preconditions, postconditions, things of that nature. Austin will be talking about them a little more in a moment. Take another step down. Right now, it's based, it can pull in multiple inputs. Right now, the primary input that we have written up for it to pull in from is just Nmap. Almost everybody uses Nmap at some point during their engagement, typically near the beginning. So it pulls in Nmap. It can parse out the output, build up an event tree, things of that nature. It pulls in all the data from Nmap, pulls it out by host, port, service, any other data that might be in Nmap, and any other tool there is. Puts it into the knowledge base. In the process, it builds out an event tree or event list for the event queue to process. What's the next one there? Oh, yeah. Once that's built out, then it goes through, pops off the top of the event queue, says, okay, what's the first action, first event, okay, which modules are listening for this as a precondition, okay, you three are fine, go process with it, and then it goes to the second one, third one, fourth one, so forth. However, that's fine, that works, but what if a module has some output that can cause another event? That's fine. Modules not only can consume events, but they can produce new events for other modules that might be listening for them. This is great for scenarios where you might have something like one event is found new port 445. Okay, there's a module listening for that. It takes it, checks to see if there's null sessions. Okay, it finds that there's null sessions on that particular instance. It fires an event saying null sessions found on this host. Another module might catch that and go, oh great, you have null sessions there, let me try to do user enumeration. It does user enumeration. If it's successful, it goes, hey, I found new users on this network. Hey, go do something. There might be other modules that are listening for that kind of event that do other things. And it's not always a linear path. It might branch out, branch in way, branching, things of that nature. And it's very dynamic. At any point when you sit down at a network, there's not a real way to know which modules are going to be run in what order, at what time on the network based on the way the event queue works. And then the process just keeps looping and looping until the event queue reaches 0. That event queue can grow and shrink as time goes on as other modules create new events, consume events, and so forth. That is as much detail into that as you probably need to know at this point. By all means, if you're interested later, check out the code, look at it, talk to us. But we'll get into other small aspects of that in a moment. So, you have this APT tool out there that can do things for you. How does it help? Well, it helps with right now, the simple aspects of your engagement. It's that first footstep on the network. What are you looking to do? It'll go out, it'll do fingerprinting, it'll go out, check your anonymous logins, it'll check null sessions, it'll do some of the simple attacks, things of this nature. It does all kind of little things right now, all the way through responder, secret dump, things like that. The more common things are scripted up already, more to come. But it does it in a very efficient, quick manner, and it does it much quicker than what I, as a human, could get in there and doing. Type it in, execute it, things like that. No matter how many session windows I have open, no matter how many terminals I have, I just can't type that fast. It can do it a lot faster. Also, to add a new module to it is fairly straightforward. There again, talk about the actual anatomy of a module here in a little bit, but it boils down to you have some metadata at the top that describes what the module is, and then a little bit of other maintenance stuff, and then finally it's just the body that says run a command and process the output of that command. So ultimately you're just trying to write a parser for any given command, and it's all in Python, fairly straightforward, lots in there already to take a look at, fairly simple to write. If you're running this on Kali, it's fairly ready to go right off the bat. 1 or 2 Python libraries that need to be installed. It's well documented, no issues there. You clone it, you run it, and you're up and going. You can feed it as input right now of an nmap file, XML file, or a target range, and it'll go run nmap for you and continue on its way. So just a quick little rundown before I hand off to Austin here. What can it do? Right now it can go out, identify services, systems, screenshot, whatever, any user interface item it sees, GUI interface, whether it's X11, VNC, web apps, things of that nature. If it finds file shares on the network, can it gain access? Yes? Okay, fine. Search through there, look for interesting files and report on them. Oh, you found accounts on the system, you have usernames. Well, let's try to brute force those. Touch on that later with the safety levels. Remember that. If we encounter a scenario that there is a Metasploit module that can help run or test for something, great. Run the Metasploit module. Definitely make use of these other tools that are out there. That's what we're going for. If it captures hashes, fine. Take it and dump it off to John or Hashcat or whatever and let it crack them. Go forth. It boils down to if there's a file or a command, a binary that you want to run on an engagement from right now in Linux environment, you can probably write a module for it fairly simply. You're not having to write to do the action. You're just writing to execute the command and parse the output and teach it and have it so that other programs can consume it. At which point I hand off to Austin.
Okay. So, like we mentioned earlier, APT2 is a framework. It's got a couple different sections, the guts of which are the modules, and we've mentioned that a few times. There are 3 basic types of modules. The first is the input one. This is something that will take the input file, say, right now, an nmap XML file, parse it out, and determine what hosts and services are available that it can run on. The second type of module is a reporting module. This is at the end of everything else that's run. It's going to go back through the knowledge base and basically iterate through it and, for example, generate a semi-nice looking HTML file that lists out all the hosts, all the services on each of those hosts, any domains they're attached to, any vulnerabilities found for each of these, and the links to the output file like that. So you can basically just go through this and see everything that was run, everything that was found, anything relevant to each of these hosts. The third and most important module, I think, is the action module. This is what each program that we'd like to run, any binary, any command, goes inside an action module, and it gets called upon from the events queue. It's got a few standard properties. Name and description are pretty self-evident. What is the name of the command that's going to be run in this module? The description helps. Is this going to run a tool in discovery mode just to identify something, or is this going to run in some sort of exploit mode to actually try to create a shell on the machine or take advantage of it? Requirements, this is typically the name of the application that this module is going to run. So if you're trying to make a Dirbuster module, you would say the requirements is Derby, and then when APT2 is run, it'll load up this module and try to execute that and see if that's actually existing on the system. If it's not, you get a warning at the beginning saying, hey, you're missing this. You might want to go install it if you are planning on running this module during the test. For things like Python libraries, you can also make them a little more descriptive. So, whereas with, a binary, you can typically run apt-get to install it on here. Maybe a Python library, someone has a preferred method of doing it. You can put that in there. You can say, hey, try running pip install and the library that you need, and that comes up as a nice helpful message for someone who hasn't installed that library on their machine. Next up is the triggers. This is what's going to this module is going to be looking for this condition for it to run. So anytime a new service is found, the trigger new port 21, new port 445, that gets thrown up in the air, and then any module that responds to that says, that's me, add me to the queue. Anytime a module runs and it says, well, I've found, this thing is vulnerable to anonymous login, or this has null enumeration, or I found credentials, it's going to throw up a new event there, and any module that is triggered off of that says, oh, that's me, add me to the queue. Those requirements are basically what allows us to not only make this dynamic, but chain multiple modules together and fire them off in sequence so that you get pretty good depth on what's going to run as this thing progresses. One of the most important things in here is the safety level. We've added this in because there are certain things that you'll want to run, but not all the time. And depending on what network you're running it on, there are some things you never want to run. So we've basically given it a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is the safest. This is discovery modules. This is things like, something like enum for Linux. You can just see, does this have null sessions? This is something like, HTTP screenshot is just go on and take a picture of whatever's on the web server. Moving down in the middle, so 4, you might start doing more things that interact with servers. 3 is where you start getting into things like, that's where we put responders. So this is something that might start doing things that interferes with network requests, and so you'll want to run this for a limited amount of time. Maybe you don't want to run this at all, so you're not going to go down that far. 4 is when you get down into brute forcing. We put it there so that, if there's, going back down, 2, going the other way. 2 is when you get into things like brute forcing, where there's risk of locking out accounts and things like that could be disruptive to the client, on a bigger level here. And then finally 1 is things where there's very real risk of just kicking over the server. Something like MSO8067, where, if you're trying to use it, there's a real chance that, it could just kill that service altogether and nobody can use it anymore. So, those safety levels are there to make sure that, it's only as destructive as you want it to be. And for the most part, if you run it at a 4, you can get a good amount of the modules in and get things you need done without worrying about anybody getting mad at you. Inside the module, basically, process is where everything happens. The event queue will call process. Process, in turn, does things like you can have it grab any targets related to a specific port or service or domain or whatever from the knowledge base and bring that back as a list, and then you can, act on them however you want. Either run a command against an individual list and run a single command against all of them. It depends on what tool or command you're going for. Limitations of the modules and the framework itself. The first one, and kind of one of the biggest ones, is the tool needs to be non-interactive. The way we've made this is more or less to fire and forget until the results come back. If a tool is prompting you for a yes or no input or to add something onto it in the middle of it, the way this runs, it's going to fire it off, and then that prompt is going to get stuck there, and then when the results come back, that's all you're going to see. Most of the modules we've written so far have been ones where you can simply say, here's the tool name and the IP address, go, wait whatever timeout we give it. Generally, you can give it, on the high end 15 minutes, and most of them will be done well before that. Something like Responder, we give it 15 minutes and then we just kill it at that point and then see what it's found in that amount of time. But those are things that you aren't required to do anything to in the meantime to get meaningful results back. Multi-threading is tricky. We basically had, it's real easy, real fast to clog up the network with a whole bunch of stuff running at once. So we've set limits throughout. We've got limits to the number of threads that can be run at once, and we've got limits to the number of threads that can be created for any one tool. So something like Responder, you only want one of them running at once. You don't want 5 instances of Responder trying to poison all the requests on the network at the same time, because then that's just going to get messy. But there's plenty of others where, the computer is perfectly happy running 10 instances of the same application at once, just on different hosts. So it's sort of a module by module basis. And at that point, it's sort of down to whoever's writing that module to use their best judgment on what they think a given network can handle. And what we try to do is just make it easy to implement these limits, for whatever the case may be. And finally, brute force with caution. There's plenty of tools out there that do all kinds of brute forcing for, any number of logins. The best we can do is add a safety level to that, but because this is sort of running blind until the end, unless you're running it in extreme verbose mode and you can just see everything happening at once, you can fire this off and then 15 minutes later come back and find out it's locked out accounts on half a dozen systems because you weren't real careful with how you were choosing it to fire these off, what accounts you were using, or you hadn't checked the password policies to see how many lockouts you could do on one before you ran this. So again, safety levels are your friend. And finally, another big one is non-standard ports. Really, APT is dependent on the inputs given to it from whatever scanning tool, either running Nmap through APT or running Nmap outside of it, or in the future running insert scanner here. When that scanner looks at a service on a host and says, oh, this is port 21, this is probably FTP, if that's the best it does, that's the best we have to go off of. APT won't know that this file saying 21 is on here, or let's say port 2000 on a host. APT doesn't know that port 2000, if Nmap didn't mark that as FTP, it won't know to do anything with that because it's not a standard port and the service name returned for it wasn't FTP. So this will throw off some modules with weird things, and this is where sort of manual testing afterwards comes in, or using a scanner that can identify non-standard ports more accurately, using something like -A on Nmap, which will do a lot more thorough check than just your typical S or T scan. So just as sort of a sanity check to ask myself, like, is this actually useful? Is this helping me? I just came up with a little scenario where I sort of tested myself against ATP. I just said, okay, what if I'm sitting on a network and there's 30 FTP services on these hosts? How do I compare to what ATP can do? So I went down the list. I said, I'm going to check each of these for anonymous login, just something simple. So, you type FTP, the IP address, you wait for the prompt, you type in anonymous, and you type in whatever for the password, and then you wait for the response to come back to say, yep, you've got anonymous login, or no, password rejected. In total, it took about 5 minutes to go through 30 servers. I'm not the fastest typer. We could say someone may be doing a manual check, copying and pasting. So they're going back and forth between a list of IPs and what they're actually doing. And this is obviously not doing bash scripting or something like that to go through these a little faster. APT was done in 40 seconds for this whole list. So that's right about 1 second per server, assuming ideal conditions, on the local network, fast response time, stuff like that. So let's extrapolate. Any service you can think of, typically what you're going to do is you're going to take the scan file and you're going to see a list of here's all the stuff that's on this network. We like to go to FTP, SMB, HTTP, stuff like that. You're going to go down, say, the Nmap output, and you're going to say, all right, there's all these hosts that have this service. So let's, grep this port out of the file. Let's cut the column out with just the IPs and dump this into a file. This is now my IP list. Going from looking through that Nmap file to cutting it into a list, generously, let's say about 30 seconds. Next, you pick a tool for the service. You're going to say, all right, for this one, this is port 80, so I'm going to run Nikto against all of these ones coming back as port 80. If it's a tool that only accepts one IP, like something like SMB client, where it's just like you're pointing this directly at this host and seeing what comes back, you're doing this repeatedly for each one of those, whether it's manually typing in, going back and forth, cutting and pasting. If you're like me, you have to read the help menu for every tool that you use, so you're going to add an extra minute on top of that, just figuring out what arguments am I supposed to add to this. That's another 30 seconds plus of just taking the IP, typing out the name of the tool, and firing it off. Now you repeat for every service that you want to do this to and every host that you want to do it to. And this baseline time of just selecting a port, generating a list, selecting a tool, getting the arguments, running it against everything, this time adds up. This is, picking and choosing a tool, figuring out how to do it, doing it against everything. APT2 removes this baseline time. It's all pretty much instant. It's going to see a list of services. It's got a bunch of things that correspond to each of these, and it's just going to know these are the arguments that are going to run against it. These are all the things I'm going to run against it. Let's go. And so basically, those minutes of each tool that you're going to use are now wiped away in a matter of 1 or 2 seconds for it, just to throw all of this out here and wait for the response from the server instead. So now to just give you sort of we've talked a lot about how this stuff runs, so now we're going to do a sort of a video demo of what's actually running, and we can show how the process works and what comes out of it.
Give me a second here to make sure I got it up and going. And, alrighty. Assuming it's working. Yeah, there we go. So, first thing you're going to notice is when you do it, well, no, it's not showing. Alright, let's pause that. That's not displaying. Let's take that out full screen. And that's still not showing. Alright. Yeah. In a moment I will. Okay. Alright, let's end the... Let's jump back over here. Hey, can you see that? Yay. Alright, let's go with that. Grab the mic so I can take a look. Go ahead. Rewind and... hit play for me if you don't mind. So, one of the things you're going to notice is there's a bunch of files in here, APT2 modules, the default config, things like that are the things that, oh well, that's fine. It's the kind of things that are there. It's standard.h help menu, a bunch of things in here, verbosity for the output, bypass menu, safety level. As Austin talked about earlier, very important, defaults to 4. You want to set that to whatever your threshold is that you're looking for. You can input a config file. You can import a XML file, things of this nature. You can read it probably faster than I can glance over there and see it. The config file, bunch of things in here. One of the things that we're talking about right now is the Metasploit interface. So, to facilitate the interaction back and forth with Metasploit, we're using the MSG RPC interface. So go ahead and fire up MSF console, have this going. reason I'm going this route with it, you can do the Metasploit interface ever how you wish. I go this way just so that I have the sessions available to me after the fact so I can still interact with them even after APT finishes. Okay, where are we going here? We're going to run it. Help. Okay, you're doing the very verbose, bypassing the menu. There is an interactive menu system with it as well. I tend to run it with the -B just to bypass that, so it's to set it and forget it, let it run, and you just watch output or come back to it after the fact. So here we go. You see some of the output, how many modules were loaded. This is slightly older version, about a month old. Newer version has a bunch more modules in it. Anytime a module requirements aren't met, it outputs it at the top up here. It doesn't stop APT from running. It just doesn't run those modules if they're encountered now. That's one way it's fault tolerant if some tool isn't present on the system. It goes ahead and scans. It finds that a couple of vulnerabilities are in the system. These are fairly minor ones at this point, but they're still flagged as vulnerabilities. Lots of output. I have debugging enabled at the moment for this. It's executing various commands. You can just see what's going on. I think threads are set like at 5 on this one right now. So lots of stuff. Go around checking a bunch of host stuff. More output, anonymous FTP, so forth. Going down through here. Null sessions. Let's see where we at. Found something was part of, actually it's not part of a domain, it's just part of work group, but there's others down here in the moment it'll flag. But yeah, this is just a bunch of the commands that are running at the moment. Where are we at here? Okay, right there is part of a domain. It pulls that in, so now it builds that into the knowledge base, knowing that there's a domain out there called HackNet, and in the future it'll start using that data when it's attacking systems and so forth. What was that? Oh, that was all the active. Every 15 to 30 seconds, I forget what it works out to, it outputs a list of all the active modules that are currently running if you got debugging enabled. One of the issues that got it to do, the to-dos is whenever you hit enter, it'll output that as well, just so you can see what's currently running at any given time. Found a bunch of IPs, a bunch of users on a particular system, so forth. Those result in their own events being fired. Another one down here, users on a Windows system, pulled them out. Null sessions, user enumeration was able to pull it. Oh, where down here? It's going to be kicking off Hydra in a moment to try to get some passwords. You're going to be doing that here soon, I know. It's doing RPC client, stuff like that still. It does it a little bit out of order. Identified, username, administrator, password. There's a couple more of these down here. What it does is anytime it finds, there's a module in there for password guessing at the moment on SMB. If it finds SMB users out there on a system, it has a very short default password list that it tries. That is going to be expanded with a couple more modules as soon as I get a chance to code it up that will dynamically generate that list based on the network name, the season, the year, things of that nature, as well as their lockout policy, if we can determine that, so that it will only go up to like lockout policy -1 attempts on any given account name, things of that nature. It finished, you saw that there was a session captured in the background. You can still interact with it at this point if you wish. Right here, boom. That was from MSL 8067. At this point, you have new directories, log, report, and proofs. Let's go ahead and look at logs. Every single thing that is output or done by the tool is logged in here with date, time stamp down to the second, so you can start piecing through there. If the customer comes back and says, something happened to this system at this time, you can go through there trying to narrow down what was going on. Were you actually targeting it at that point? Something of that nature. So let's jump into the reports. There's the report Austin was referring to earlier. That's just one sample of a report module that can be written, generates this kind of report. We're not going to display it in the demo here, but still, you can have any kind of report generated out. You can have it output to comma separate values, whatever you want. Just a matter of writing a little module that will pull from the knowledge base to output in whatever format you wish. Even that up to you all, or to us if we get the chance. The proofs directory is a listing of every output of every command that was run by APT. So that if you want to go back and scrap through it, search through it, for example, the output of secrets dump here, you can see it, the NTDS output. It was successful, it dumped it out, you can see that. Just run John on that quickly. Simple little passwords, nothing special there, but it's kind of things it would have done internally as well. It's going to jump through a few of these real quick. I'm just going to talk as that's going. Reason we have it capturing every output and putting it out there in this way instead of just discarding it when it's done is that, yeah, fine, we have all the data in the knowledge base that we feel is useful, but here's all the output of these. If you want to go through and grep through for some nugget of information that we might not be parsing out yet or some of that nature, it's all still there. Also, in our reports at least, when we put in a finding that vulnerability XYZ was found on host, well, here's an example of how we tested for it. You can open up one of these files, screenshot that, and that shows the command that was run, the output of it, then you can highlight it. It's all there ready for you to use that in a report if you wish. What's it doing here? For the Metasploit modules, there's multiple types of Metasploit modules for APT you can write ones that are exploit-based ones, and ones that only react when sessions are opened. If a new session is opened due to any exploit, one of these other modules can run, such as going in and dumping system information, going in and dumping Windows hashes, things of that nature, or any post operation you want. It's going through, doing a few. The knowledge base will show in a minute, just more of the hash dumps, stuff like that. But still, this is almost done, I think. Yeah. So, that's just a quick run through of it. There's been a lot more added to it. Right now, the knowledge base dump that is dumped out to the file system after it's done is XML. That's soon to be replaced with a SQLite database that you can open up and search through. In the current version, though, it is just the XML database. So you can go ahead and close that out. Just hit the X there. Or that'll work. Go up to slide. I think it's F5 or something. Oh well, yeah, it was on a Mac, so it doesn't work. Or just go up to view. Yeah, I'll do it. Where are we? And of course we're all the way back. I always forget the option there. And, alright, so demo time. That was a quick run through of some of the current capabilities of it. We actually have a few more modules in APT that are demonstrated there. Lots of other attack vectors. There's stuff for JBoss and a bunch of your web app stuff. Responders in there, things of this nature. Things that you typically, it's attacks, tools, techniques that you typically use on that first day and a half of an engagement when you sit down there. A lot of commonality you tend to do. At least it's a lot of the commonality that we end up doing ourselves. That's not necessarily saying that's things that you do, but odds are you do some portion of that as well. So when we're dealing with this, we have a bunch of questions out there to the audience, to the industry as a whole. If you're interested in using something like this, what kind of tools or techniques do you use that can be repeated, can be reprocessed, can be automated, things of this nature? If there is something out there, by all means, hit us up on GitHub, put in an issue, a request, a new feature request, something of that nature. Or if you are so inclined to start writing your own modules for it, go out there, write your own modules, put in a pull request, things of that nature. We're available at any given time out there. Our contact will be on the next one. Some of the future plans that we have interest in going with ourselves are more than just the Nmap import. That was in there as a placeholder for now, and we just haven't gone back to write other ones for Nessus, Nexpose, Burp Suite, whatever your choice of other input source is. Finishing out the full attack chains for not just Responder here, but for some of the other attack chains that we typically use. We have many of them finished, but some of them are just piecemealed in there. We were missing a few modules. Make sure we fill all that out, have full attack chaining going on. In the process, write as many more modules as we can that are going to be useful to people. make prettier reports, maybe write a few other report modules, and I haven't started on this yet, but migrate this all over to Python 3. It's currently on 2.7. The main instigator of that is there are certain issues that I've encountered with 2.7 that would be much more easily circumvented or taken care of in 3 than in 2.7, so might go down that path in the next couple months. But yeah, it's one of those things. If you're interested in it, please talk to us, put in requests, work on it yourself. We're open for any kind of criticism or compliments or shaking of head, stuff like that, or buying of whiskey. It's whatever what you want. I don't care. And finally, you can reach us Twitter, email, GitHub, pick your poison. At which point, I don't know what the time is. I don't have my phone on me, but still. 3:46. Okay. So, just a few minutes left here. Any questions, comments, criticisms? Yes. Oh, they're over there. They were bothering my feet, so sorry. I'm not used to them, but still. Shoes are over there somewhere, but how do we handle dependencies? As of right now, we're going off of the base version that is in Kali on each instance where possible. When those get updated or when the common version of each tool is updated, we're planning on going back and checking each module and things of that nature. There are no actual version checks within the modules themselves, other than the fact that the module will just error out if it doesn't work the way it's expecting. The command line options are different. It'll output an error log. You can look at that, figure out what's going on, and put in an issue ticket, and we can address it at that point.
But like I said, we got our first issue ticket last night. Shout out to Chappie for finding a bug for us. Yay.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, that's an easy one I can fix quickly. So, but yes, if you are using it or if you just want to bug us or whatever, put in tickets, things of that nature. We're happy to comment with you, talk to you, whatever. Yes, sir. Well, okay, the question is how does this correlate, overlap, what have you with Sparta? I don't have a great answer to that other than to say that at the time we were starting to work on this, we didn't, including Sparta, we didn't find any tool out there that met our needs the way that we wanted them met. So, that's why I'm saying even with this, APT2 works works with us the way that we like it. We tried to open source it so other people work on it. And we're not expecting it to be a one-size-fits-all out there. Obviously, there's lots of tools in the InfoSec industry that helps illustrate that not everybody likes the same thing, does it the same way. If this way works for you, great. Work with us on it, help it make it better. If Sparta is the way that you choose to go with it, all that, great. Go with that. And maybe we will, in a little bit later, do a more in-depth comparison of the two and see if there's something we can work with them on or pull from or something of that nature. But just off the top of my head, the best answer I can give you is that it didn't fit our needs as what we were needing. So I know that's not the best answer for you, but that's the honest truth. Anybody else out there? Yes? No? Maybe? All right. Well, thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the day.